Hi, in this lesson we're going to talk about layering different specular layers to create our shader. So this is where we left in our last video. Just rename the scene to '06 begin. And this was the render we had. So let's bring our hypershade. We have our plane. I'm just going to graph it out. And the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to break this connection. I don't really need this anymore. So with this guy, I have my phasing ratio that has been reversed, and now it's being remapped into my plane material. So there's going to be a couple of things that I'm going to do quickly just to show you how we could start approaching that. First is that I'm going to change, I'm just moving everything out. I'm going to change my BRDF to be Ward. We're going to try to create some kind of metal looking material. So change this to Ward, and I'm going to change this graph to be way less reflective. Something like 3 at the beginning, like 0.3 at the beginning. By the way, in some renders, this number, when it goes down before it starts going up, it's called K, and then this function, how it goes, it's called N. So if you're working with Maxwell or Arnold, I know of those two, they'll usually have an N and a K value, and the N, it's similar to the index of refraction for the Fresnel in V-Ray, and the K is that number that we were talking about, how in some metals before it starts going up it actually goes down a little bit, which is very common in conductive materials. So we have this. I'm just going to make sure it looks kind of nice. Okay, it doesn't really have to go down that much. That looks good. I'm just going to re-render, see how it looks. We should have a lot more of that Fresnel effect. Okay, I like that. Yeah, that seems good. We're using a 0.8 for our glossiness. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take, and before I do anything else, let's just add some color. So we're working with some color, I don't know, red. Okay, so it looks like a red metal shader. It has a little bit of noise, but it's not quite behaving the way I would like to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this shading group to one side. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to duplicate it with its connections. There we go. So it's still connected. We don't have to connect all that. And the other thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a V-Ray blend material. We will be using tons and tons and tons of blend materials. And what the blend material allows you to do is to start stacking up or layering shaders, and then have an opacity map or some kind of map to control how much influence one shader is getting over the other one. So with this guy connected, I'm just gonna change this. So now this is the shader assigned to our shading group. I'm gonna connect this plane material, which I'm gonna rename base material. I'm going to connect it to my base material. There we go. And now this first one, which we could call code 00, I'm going to plug it into my code 0. So right now, since both shaders are identical, we're going to see, let me just make sure this is assigned. Yeah. We're going to see no difference because both shaders are identical. So it's just stacking one on top of the other. There should be no difference. But what I want to do is that usually when you have metal or anything like that, unless you're treating with the raw pure metal, it's going to have tiny layers on top of it, which usually could be grease, lacquer, some kind of oil paint or something like that, that are going to change the specularity. So I want to start adding those different layers on top of it. So the first I'm going to do is that with this metal, without changing our reflectance curve, I'm just going to change a little bit our glossiness. So I'm going to add, I don't know, 9. So you see it has like a more defined specular highlight, and it's less noisy. It's less blur my reflection. And right now it's just being blended by a 0.5, like a middle gray. So I'm going to bring this down to maybe 25. Get a render and just see how that looks. So we should see a very similar render, but it's going to have a tiny bit more less blurry reflections, and our specular highlight is going to look a little bit different. So before we do anything, let me just bring this down, re-render this, and we're going to start using the V-Ray history in the frame buffer to be able to see the difference. So I'm going to open my history. I'm going to delete these guys, which we don't really, actually, yeah, we don't really need these guys. Yeah, these were some tests, so I'm just going to save this. And now I'm going to, with that saved, I'm going to bring this blend amount to maybe 35, like 0.35, re-render, and save this. So now with this guy, I can come here and tell him to be A, and this guy to be B. So if we move this line, we can see there's a tiny bit of difference. If we come here and look at the reflection pass and just zoom in a tiny bit, you're going to see there's a tiny bit of difference. This one is a little bit less blurred. Again, we have a lot of noise because our settings are not optimal for final render, but you can see the difference. But most of the difference are when I really want to work on, it's on my specular highlight. This is my really broad specular, and this one is a little bit more defined. We still have a little bit of this like broad metal-like thing, but then on top of it, we have a way more defined specular. And when you start stacking up different specular layers with different glossy levels, we can get that combination of really broad speculars with really fine defined speculars, one on top of each other. So another thing we could do is maybe bring this number down, 25, there we go, and come and duplicate this guy once more. So I've duplicated it, and again I'm going to change my glossiness to maybe 97.5, so I have a very defined, maybe less. Okay, and we're going to place this guy here. If any of you guys have seen the series of tutorials that Grant Warwick has online, he does this usually with the same BRDF, but the layering thing has been going on. He explains it really well, but a lot of people have been doing it. A lot of people will combine blends with Word, and usually when you're trying to create a material that has a refraction, several specular layers on top, or like some kind of scattering and then several specular layers on top, this is the way to go. So I have this, I have my two codes, and I'm going to change the influence of that second code to be a little bit less, so maybe 35. Done. I think I closed my frame buffer, and I'm going to re-render again. Okay, so I'm going to save this guy. And I'm going to set this as B, and my first one as A. So this was our very broad specular highlight. This is our new one. And let's set this one as A now. So we see the difference between just having 2 and 1. You see we're still getting some of these broader speculars, but our main specular highlight now it's way more defined. We still get this broad area around here, like this bigger specular, but now this really bright one is still, it's way more defined. We look at the reflect, we're going to see that we're cleaning and cleaning and cleaning. This was our first one, this was our second one, and now this is our third one. So this is really good for the specular highlights, but what about if we want to keep some of that reflection either glossy or not glossy or things like that? And that's when we have to start thinking about other ways to blend our materials that are not only just by using colors. One of the things we can do is that we can still use this phasing ratio, so we get a lot more blending on the edges and a lot less blending on the front. So we don't get that much of that fine reflection that it's not being blurred, but we still get a little bit of the specular. So I can come pick up my remap value. I'm just going to duplicate it with my network. I should name this really quick. This is my remap for glossiness. And this can be my remap code 00. So I'm going to come and I'm going to bring this guy down a little bit. And I'm just going to create some kind of curve where as it goes to the 90-degree angle, it increases a lot. But in the front, it's somewhere around 2 or 2.5, maybe less, like 1.5, something like that. So I'm going to try this guy here. I'm going to kill my second code so I can see exactly what's going on just with my first code. And I'm going to plug this guy here. So we need to come, it's actually, you cannot just drop it because it's going to try to plug the wrong parameter. It's going to try to plug the out color, and we want to plug the out value. So out value in my blend amount 0, I need to come and plug it individually to the red, green, and blue. If you just bring this guy and plug it here, it's going to plug up the wrong parameter, so it's not going to do any difference. Now with that plugged, let me select my viewport again, create a new render. And now this is my reflection. It looks a lot better, like way more glossy. But if we come and look at our specular, we still have a little bit of that specular. Not as much as we would like to, but we have that specular. So we're keeping that blurry reflection, but now we can pay more attention to our specular. And the reason that happens is that since our specular tend to have a value over 1 just by right-clicking on top of it, this is going to get a lot more blending than our reflection, which usually our value is under 1. If you can look at it, it's all under, I think the maximum value is like 0.2. So we have that specular that it has a really bright color. So we're being able to blend enough that we can see it, but we're not blending that much from the reflection. So with this here, I'm going to stop the video now, and we're going to continue on the next video stacking layers. Right now we're using all wards, but eventually we're going to start changing to some wards and some bling. And then after that, we'll start using where our base material has no specular or no reflectivity, but has either a diffuse component that we want to treat by itself, or a refraction or scattering component that we want to treat by itself. So we will be working with a lot of examples, and then by the end of the course, we'll work on a scene where we can apply all those shaders. So we'll continue on the next video.